What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Let's just say it outright. Russia's war machine is falling apart, and the duct tape holding it together is now being snatched from the Cold War junkyards. The empire that once dreamed of blitzkriegs and liberating cities in days is now scouring its own rusted graveyards for T62 tanks that have not seen combat since disco was cool. I mean, it is still kinda cool, but you get the idea. These are not symbolic relics or nostalgic museum showpieces, no, they are now combat-ready tools of the state. Not because of the strategy, but because of panic. And Ukraine's intelligence confirms it. Russia is so short on real military hardware that it is dragging these iron fossils out of deep Siberia, pretending it is part of some kind of master plan. They even say it is temporary. But as you might already know, temporary fixes within the Russian military almost always mean permanent solutions. Nothing says we are winning like bringing 50-year-old scrap metal to the frontline, because your tank factories are already just producing as much as they can, or silent, and your engineers are busy googling how to make a guidance system out of a toaster. And while the Kremlin parades this regression as resilience, its much hyped summer offensive is doing a full-blown belly flop. No major breakthroughs, no key victories, just a continuous stream of body bags, missile spam, and desperate speeches from a president who thinks history is a board game where he can claim land by just shouting at it. It's mine. This story is not just about old tanks, it's about a decaying regime trying to save face with duct tape dreams, bad math, and enough dead soldiers to fill a continent. So guys, let's get straight into it. Let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer absurdity of it. Russia in the year 2025 is deploying T62 tanks. That's not a typo, T62s. These things were rolling off assembly lines back when the Beatles were still together, and American astronauts were walking on the moon for the first time. Some of these tanks were already considered old and obsolete when Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979. And now they are being paraded back into the battlefield as if slapping a fresh layer of paint on them turns them into some kind of Terminator machines. Where are they even coming from? Reportedly Zabaikalsky Krai. Not exactly a bustling metropolis, but it turns out it's hiding one of Russia's biggest tank cemeteries. That's right, tank cemetery. A facility in Atamanovka is now working overtime to bring these mechanical zombies back to life. Except there is one big problem. Time and weather have done what NATO never could. Completely gutted these machines. Most of them sat outside for decades. No storage, no maintenance, rain, snow, rust, rot, everything. Some don't even have functioning engines. And ones that do, well, let's just say they were already outdated before VHS tapes even existed. Russian officials claim that these tanks will reinforce defensive positions. That's almost their literal quote. The translation that they will be welded into the dirt as immovable gun platforms, well, because they're so unreliable, you could not even drive them more than a few kilometers without risking catastrophic failure. But hey, if you are looking for a big steel scarecrow to make it look like you have a real army, a T62 will do just fine. And all of this, every ounce of this absurdity, is because Russia has burned through nearly 11,000 tanks since 2022. 11,000. That's a 5-digit number. That's more tanks than most countries ever built in their history. They're not even recycling or rebuilding lost tanks. They just abandon them right there on the battlefields, always thinking that the state apparatus will send more. Why risk your life saving 50 tons machine and then use soldiers to repair it, when you can send these very soldiers in a meat assault instead? The choice for a Russian officer is obvious. Immediate results are always preferred and prioritized over long-term benefits. And this kind of logic is applied literally almost everywhere across every branch of the Russian military. So no wonder seemingly unlosable offensives turn into grinding combats that yield no results besides tens of thousands new black bags being sent back home. This is precisely what happened to Russia's so-called summer offensive, which stalled before it could even produce any meaningful results. Let's now talk about it in our next chapter. So now we pivot to Russia's famous summer offensive, or more accurately, the Great Summer Shuffle. After months of build-up, propaganda, and promises of mass breakthroughs, what did they deliver? A few burnt-out villages, thousands more dead soldiers, and absolutely no momentum. The offensive allegedly began in May with a big dramatic push, hoping to regain the ground losses they suffered in Kharkiv and Liman last year, and their idea was pretty simple. Flood the zone with bodies, drones and artillery, then spin whatever happens, whatever achievements, whatever results they got, into a so-called victory. Problem is, none of that ever worked. In Sumy, for example, their assault hit a wall as well. Ukraine's top general Alexander Syrskyi says straight to the point, the Russians have been stopped, the front line stabilized, the advance frozen. Syrskyi is not gloating, he is just reporting, and that's even worse for Moscow. Because it's not that Ukraine pushed them back in some dramatic counterattack, no. It's that Russia itself ran out of steam on its own. And even in Donetsk, where they poured troops into hotspots like Pokrovsk, they still could not grab any major objectives. According to the experts, they are running short on artillery, their drone swarms are getting intercepted mid-air, and their logistical chain is stretched so thin, it is practically transparent at this point. The mighty Russian army is now sending foot soldiers on motorcycles with little to no help. It is like watching a war fought with farm tools. But here is where the propaganda really goes off the rails. Every time they seize a tiny piece of land or an abandoned pre-war village or a pile of rubble, the state media loses its mind, saying, "Victory in Zirka!" they scream, as if Zirka was not a village with 3 houses and a dog. These are not victories, they are just press releases with blood. And by the way, we spoke about these Russian soldiers being given nothing more than a dirt bike and ordered to reach a point of contact all by themselves. I think it is pretty obvious that it did not go well. I mean, you've seen the videos, right? So let's briefly discuss this phenomena in our next chapter. Let's talk about the soldiers. Because while Putin sits in his bunker talking about historic destiny, it's not his cronies or his relatives dying on the front lines. It is kids from Vladivostok, Dagestan, Buryatia. It's men who sign up because they were lied to or blackmailed, or offered a sign-up bonus so big it felt like winning a lottery ticket. Only to end up on the battlefield with no proper gear, no real training, and in some cases not even a helmet or an armored vest. And so now they are riding Chinese-made motorbikes across minefields. And I mean, seriously. The same machines teenagers use for food delivery are now becoming the tools of war. They go in with little support, usually a dozen or less, trying to probe so-called Ukrainian defenses, while flying drones overhead. Most obviously do not come back, because this is not a probing force, it is literally a bait. Cannon fodder to expose where Ukrainian troops are hiding, so they can be shelled later. And if you survive that, well, you are expected to hold the line with an ancient tank, broken comms, and absolutely no air cover for how long? Nobody knows, just hold the line. Meanwhile, Ukraine adapts smaller units, hidden bunkers, precision strikes. They're not fighting like it is the World War II, they are fighting like it is the new modern warfare, smart, deadly, efficient. And that's why Russia's approach keeps failing. They cannot adapt, they refuse to, because adapting means admitting that the old ways are dead, and that means confronting their own decay. Economically, it is a horror show as well. 40% of public spending is now going to the military, the state is bleeding money, inflation is cooking the ruble alive, and the so-called reserve fund almost dry. Nabulna, the central bank chief, says it in coded terms, but, well, the message is pretty clear. The piggy bank is, guys, empty, and the house is on fire. Putin still brags about Rostec, the biggest military contractor, growing tenfold, well, but the quality questionable, and the costs unsustainable. It is like bragging that your sports team lost with a record score, 0-22, I don't know. Has your team achieved something and put its name in the history books? Well, yes, but at what cost? So, where does all this leave the man in charge? Right where he always is, deliriously convinced of his own genius. Last week Putin once again said the quiet part out loud, all of Ukraine is ours. There's no ambiguity left, no negotiating table, no backdoor deals, just raw imperialism dressed up as a national pride. He still insists that wherever the foot of a Russian soldier steps, this is our land now. Well, someone should tell him that foot is missing 3 toes and tied to a body that has not eaten in days. This war is no longer about strategy, it's about inertia, a hamster wheel of death and lies. Russia pushes forward because it does not know how to stop. There is no plan, just repetition. No goals, just vanity. The only thing Putin has more of than soldiers is excuses. Every failure is a strategic repositioning, every stalemate is as planned, and every collapse is just temporary. Meanwhile, Ukraine is not just waiting. Their domestic arms production is ramping up. They are building drones that strike deep into Russian territory. They are attacking bomber bases with gear mounted on trucks. That is not desperation, that is innovation. That is what a country fighting for its life should look like. And what is Russia doing? Throwing another 40,000 troops into the meat grinder near Pokrovsk. These soldiers were once civilians, tricked by recruiters, promised wealth or told that they had no choice. And now they are dying by the thousands to hold meaningless scraps of land. Meanwhile, Russian citizens are told that this is about honor, glory, protection. But they are not told that their fathers, brothers and sons are being buried under names that are not even their own. What's the scariest part? Russia can still do it. They, unfortunately for Ukrainians, for the continuation of this war, they have the manpower, they have money reserves, though constantly shrinking. They have propaganda. What they do not have is a future. Not at least one that makes sense. Not one that anyone would want to live in. Putin's Russia should cease to exist, because that's not the country people would want to live in for generations. It is capable of much more. And there's only one single person restricting entire country's full potential. Well, there guys, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below, for example Patreon, where you can see these episodes in early access and also get additional chapter at the end of each episode. Once again, the link is down below. Thanks so much for watching, see you tomorrow.
To sway, we do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.